Hi, everybody. This is Justin Kramer with ProShip. Just to let you know, we're going to be waiting a few minutes here to let some stragglers come in. We should be starting no later than 5 minutes after the hour. All right. It's been 5 minutes. It's 5 after the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, this is Justin with ProShip, and let me go ahead and introduce Josh Mayer, who's probably going to be driving most of the slides in the conversation today. Actually, let me go ahead and introduce myself then. I'm Justin Kramer. I'm one of the co-founders of ProShip, and I will be the ProShip representative during today's call. Let me go ahead and throw it over to Scott to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Scott Davis. My role here at JD Finish Line is to optimize our existing supply chain software with the current distribution center infrastructure, along with any other optimizations that are available with implementations such as this. I'll pass it over to Paul.
Thanks, Scott. Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Wade. I'm with Manhattan Associates. I'm the engagement director for Finish Line. Been working closely with Finish Line over the last 4 years, and I have been with Manhattan for a total of 20 years. All right, I'll pass it over to Josh now.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Mayer, and I am the managing partner of Summit Advisory Team. I think most of you are familiar with ProShip and Manhattan on the call. So Summit Advisory Team is a a team of omnichannel and supply chain experts, and we help clients with projects such as this, from strategy to sustainment. Our role in this engagement with the Finish Line team was to lead their dynamic shipping initiative, which is what we'll talk about today from a program management standpoint. So happy to be here today, and along with the rest of the crew on the phone, collectively talk about how we helped Finish Line achieve some of their program goals. Before we begin, I guess just a handful of housekeeping items to address just regarding the structure of the presentation. So firstly, there's no call-in number for this meeting, so you have to use your computer's audio. Hopefully you've recognized that by now. Secondly, the session is being recorded, and all participants will receive an email with a link to the on-demand presentation post-webinar. We collectively welcome audience participation. So our team is managing some of the Q&A behind the scenes. And we will attempt to address some of the questions that you ask in line with the presentation, as well as try to manage the time so that we get through some of our planned content today. However, should you have any other questions after the presentation, our contact information is included in the document, which leads me to the final call out here on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll see the handout section, and you should be able to see a copy of a PDF copy of the slides for reference, along with some other materials. So the agenda for today, so Scott Davis from Finish Line is going to kick things off by providing an overview of the JD Sports and Finish Line organization, and then introduce us to their DTC fulfillment network, which is really intended to be for context for the audience. He will also share some of the key goals with us as we look to connect the dots between overall JD Sports, Finish Line, and then program specific strategies. I think this is where we will introduce, some of the importance of customer experience and begin to describe how the teams work together, not only to decrease costs, but also to improve the customer experience. From there, I'll take over from Scott and describe the approach we used for implementation. So this will be talking through some of the vendor selection process, why Finish Line decided to work with ProShip, the partnership with Manhattan, and then continue on from there and go through not only the benefits realization, but lessons learned. And then finally, we'll wrap up today's session and address any outstanding questions we have from the audience, assuming we have time. And so with that, Scott, I will turn it over to you to introduce JD Sports Finish Line.
Well, thanks, Josh. For everyone on the call, it's been a real exciting last couple years. Many of you may know the merger with JD Sports occurred with Finish Line, and it couldn't have been at a better time. The companies just meld real well together. A few call outs for us, athletic footwear, apparel, accessories, and then one of the exciting things for us are our flagship stores. You can see on the slide there, we have some in Denver, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and so for JD Sports Finish Line to get the brand out there is really important, and we've been able to achieve that over the last 2 years, specifically because of the merger. Want to move to the next slide, Josh? So what are we about? For us, it's all about the customer, and 3 of our pillars that we use to achieve this are experience. And as I go through here, feel free to ask some questions, and I'll jump through there. For experience, we'll say, every touch point that we have with our customer, we want them to have a smile on their face, a memorable experience with us. And so when we went in to try to make a decision with this project, that was top of mind for us because that's ultimately what drives our business. The second pillar, our product, not a big secret there. If you've ever visited our stores or jdsports.com or finishline.com, you've seen that we have the high heat and the release product that is in high demand all the time. And then finally, the service. So when we think about service, relative to this project, it gives us an opportunity to be more consistent. So even though we were already at a high level of customer engagement and good customer service, this project allowed us a different customer facing opportunity as well. So next. So here's where we'll start talking about a little bit of what our infrastructure looked like, and then how we began the partnership with ProShip. So we had to take a look at our fulfillment network, which is about 950 retail locations, primarily US malls and some shops inside Macy's. And then we have the one distribution center in the middle of the crossroads of America in Indianapolis, Indiana. And then we ship, out of that DC, and then also roughly 550 stores. So it was important to us during this time when we looked at our fulfillment network and we're looking for a partner, someone that worked with Manhattan with our current existing WMOS system that would meld together well, and then from an implementation perspective that just had that historical value of success. And so this was one of the foundations that we knew had to be seamless for us when we looked at the network and we looked at the partnerships as we began the journey to choose ProShip. You go to the next slide.
Yep, and Scott, if you don't mind, I'll chime in here. So I think, some of the context for the audience, as retailers really leverage their physical footprint by, omnichannel capabilities such as ship from store, you can see that with the Finish Line network having many ship from locations and only the single warehouse, I think the dynamics are just drastically different than your typical multi-warehouse network. And so throughout this project and with the Finish Line team, Manhattan and ProShip teams, we had a lot of dialogue about how to properly leverage those locations. So how do we make sure that we ship from the closest location possible to the customer and select the best, respective shipping service? And so I think whether it's you're a B2C or a B2B company, that question remains the same. As some of these dynamics change, how is that end-to-end logic working behind the scenes? And so I think there was kudos to the Finish Line team, because I think they realize it's really impossible to have static shipping logic in order to execute a strategy like that. However, that strategy is broader than just shipping, right? It starts with order capture. So I think that's some of the dialogue that we hope that, as attendees to this, you take away, that as you take advantage of some of these new capabilities and your physical footprint, make sure that your strategies are tying out to that.
Yeah, that's perfect, Josh. We're going to get into this a little bit later, but it's also around the labor component of all those locations and how we're able to minimize the impact to them as well. So now we're trying to figure out what are our opportunities, right? We feel like we're doing pretty good, right, as most companies do, but what is it that is attainable? What is a stretch goal for us? How can we look at a application such as ProShip and drive it to the best performance possible? And here are two key categories that we knew going in that we needed. And as we looked at these two, right, the click to delivery consistency, and then of course cost. So the consistency of click to delivery, right? Pretty good metric to say, here's how well we're delivering when we say we promise that we're going to deliver. And in today's society, everyone has purchased things online, right? All of us. And we want the email, we want the updates, we want to know that if you tell us it's going to be there, it's going to be there. And ProShip, when we began the journey of selection and we knew how robust their routing engine was and the manner in which we could choose to surprise and delight, even if we wanted to, get it to them faster within cost constraints. we were performing really well before this, but this was something that we knew we had to get more consistent, and we wanted to make sure that our customers could count on us. And as we went through design, this is another effect. The design was something that we kept this top of mind. Did you have something to add, Josh?
Yeah, I think, one of the messages for the audience here, I think a lot of you have, supply chain or operational backgrounds. And I think this aspect of experience is really interesting, and it's becoming more relevant across the industry. And so, part of the message here is that, yes, it's almost table stakes to focus on optimization of expense and costs, but if you're going to spend, time, effort, resources, and budget on something, it should also be an initiative that improves that customer experience. And I think for us, like I talked about, we had a lot of dialogue about what's the end-to-end strategy and how are we going to execute that holistically. And I think, a really good way to do both is just to focus on, optimizing your lead time to your customer. And that's kind of the approach we use here. So notice we're talking about consistency. We're not talking about speed, because speed can be a factor of your kind of your value proposition to your end customer, and that's largely driven off what your end customer needs. But making sure that you're reducing costs and doing what you promised your customer is going to be the new table stakes.
And Josh, there's that might be a good time to fit in a question from the audience here. It sounds like there was a lot of planning involved here, and what they want to know is when it came to the execution piece, did you guys leverage ProShip for just the warehouses, the stores, or both?
So that's a great question. We actually leverage ProShip in both. And it's really exciting to answer this one, right? So, because we just have the one DC. In the DC, you set up, the routing engine and the routing rules, and it's just one location. From a store's perspective, they're all across the country. So we're going to get to more of this later as well, but just why did we want to use ProShip in the stores as well as the DC? And from our perspective it was the same value proposition, right? We're going to have consistency, whether the order came in and was fulfilled from the store or from the DC. And then the other component on the slide here was, of course, the cost. And cost is relative. You meet the customer's expectation, and then cost you're certainly gonna manage, but depends on that promise that you commit to them. So yeah, we ship everything. Our entire network uses ProShip. Josh?
Yep, absolutely. And I think in order to achieve that consistency, right, because the customer doesn't know or really care where the shipment's coming from, so we had to roll out the ProShip specific capabilities across the entire fulfillment network for Finish Line to achieve that goal. All right, Scott.
Yeah, so here again, these are some pillars, guiding principles that we had. So currently with our supply chain WMOS software, we don't really have the ability to very easily make a change, to add or even modify existing carriers. And as many of you know, potentially, I guess, on the phone that utilize the Manhattan system, they've even recently introduced the Paul, I believe it's the EPI for the more recent versions of WMOS.
That's correct, Scott. So for those that don't know what EPIs is, our external parcel integration. So for Finish Line, they're on version 2012. So for versions 2015 and lower, we have to build out the EPI. But what we've done now is starting in version 26, we've introduced a base EPI. It allows us to integrate with any third-party parcel vendor. And then also, I'd like to also mention that, even with the new WM that we recently announced over our user conference, we have Manhattan Active Warehouse Management, and that's a cloud-based versionless WM. It gives you continuous access to new capabilities, and the great thing about it is it never needs upgrading. And that version also has the base EPI.
So that's sticking with carrier management then from my side, if you will, the customer of Manhattan. So we had to, as we began the journey again, we had to meet with them and we had to ask, who have you implemented with? Who have you had success with? Why would we do this? Can you help us as our partners? And we knew very quickly that we needed some sort of carrier management more robust than what was available. And where we're at today in the world, I'm sure many of you understand the network packages. It's a good thing, right? So we positioned ourselves with this carrier management tool to help us out tremendously. So before I go to the next portion, Josh, I'm going to pass this question over to you.
Sure.
Does every store require specific hardware at each store for multi-label printing?
Sure, and for this project with Finish Line, we were largely able to reuse the existing label printing hardware and terminals that they had in place. However, Justin, I don't know if you want to touch on some of your key relationships with label providers and printer hardware.
Yeah, so the reality is you want to use hardware that's going to work for your for the environment. If you've got space for a thermal barcode printer, great. Not every store is going to have a backroom space for something like that. So you may want to leverage the ability to do a collate where you actually print the carrier label on a letter-sized or legal-sized sheet of paper with a peel-off section on that. So you don't have to have the same components in every location, but it does make it a lot easier for the configuration setup, the rollout of new stores, things of that nature. What really matters more in a store implementation is the user interface. So that user interface is going to control that hardware. So if we can leverage an existing user interface, so your store operators are not having to switch out of their point of sale solution or out of another piece of software that they're used to using, that makes things a lot simpler. Believe it or not, the hardware piece is one of the easiest parts to deal with, whether it's using regular sheet-fed printers or selectively adding thermal barcode printers to your higher volume stores.
I think even to add maybe a little bit more color on the label itself, hopefully the individual that posed the question, this is helpful too, right? Labels are not always the easiest thing to manipulate within WM systems, depending on the software, of course, that you bolt on or what you're using. But with ProShip, the label changes required to meet carrier demands. First of all, they're compliant with every carrier that they have in their engine. But not only that, if there's some other customizations or requirements that you have, it was unbelievably simple coming from some label software that sometimes traditionally real hard to get, and then you have to go back through the actual certification process with the carrier. So kind of wanted to stick that in there because early on in my design career, sometimes you can find out that you need to worry about that label a lot, and ProShip manages that for you. So that was terrific for us. Okay. Robust rules engine. We've talked about this a little bit already. However, if you can think about it, it can pretty much be developed within the ProShip rules engine. Depending on who your carrier is and what your network looks like, you can customize the rules in which an order for fulfillment to delivery comes in, and even in addition to the rules engine, They can capture different things for you and add different tables that'll help you modify the manner in which the engine actually digests the data and then makes a decision. And what's really neat here too is there's some reporting that you can use and say, well, if it would have went this way or if it would have went that way, what would have happened? So Josh, you want to add some more color to this one?
Yeah, and as I'll talk about next, you know, a big component of, as I mentioned, the vendor selection process for Finish Line. And given that one of their core goals was this click to delivery consistency, making sure that they selected a vendor that had not only robust, you know, logic in terms of how particular carriers or carrier services were selected at the package level, but also flexibility, to Scott's point, in the event that, you know, we knew we had some custom rules to Finish Line that we wanted to build in, and we needed to be able to do that fairly easily. And Justin, this may be a good time just to have you talk a little bit about some of those capabilities within ProShip, not only the advanced date shopping, but just kind of the logic going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so really what it comes down to is the reason why, in our opinion, why Finish Line had such a great experience is because there was great separation of concerns. You know, having the Manhattan components deal with all of the item picking and packing and things of that nature allowed ProShip just to do what ProShip does, which is to select the best service. Whether that's something as simple as just a basic rate shopping where you're saying, can I get it there cheaper with carrier A versus carrier B, or whether it's something more complicated like advanced date shopping, which takes multiple sets of data into account, including things, which is really important in a store environment, things such as when is your pickup call if you don't have a daily pickup at that store. You may have a pickup, you may need to call for a pickup by noon and then have all of your parcels ready by 2 or 3 p.m. in order for that driver to come and pick up. Now, to us, those are pretty straightforward business rules. And because we have done this a lot of times, it's something where we're going to bring a lot of those questions to the table. And if the enterprise software stack and the partner software that we're working with already has a lot of the rest of it dealt with, the inventory, how to send your employees to go and pick a particular item, that makes things significantly easier. But it is that coordination between all of the different parts of what I like to call the enterprise software stack that makes these things feel so easy for a deployment.
So that's actually a good segue into the no process change. And I realize this is titled number 3 on our program goals, but we spoke to it a little bit earlier. The 500 plus fulfillment locations, and you know, a lot of volume coming through our DC. We challenged the entire group, you know, Manhattan, ProShip, and Finish Line, and then the Summit Advisory Team and Josh, and said, we do not want any user to come in the day that after we implement, and we do not want the user to know we've made any change at all. It's a pretty daunting task to try to say that, right? Typically in any upgrade that you do, there's some heartburn that you experience with the operations group. And coming from part of my 25 years in supply chain, 15 of that was spent in operations, I've been on the other side where somebody implemented something and it had an impact. And even though we felt like we communicated effectively, you know, there may be always a little something. On this, as Justin pointed out, we are doing just creative things with the rules engine, the ADS, the advanced date shopping, and the end user is just simply getting a label, just like they did the Friday before we turned it on Saturday. So that was one of the main components that we said we may have a real opportunity here to implement something that is going to give us an advantage for our customers and at the same time not even have a little speed bump in the road for operations. So I continue to tell the same story to everyone about this piece. If you go in with that and you can meet the criteria that Justin mentioned for your current supply chain software, you will get a lot of pats on the back for that, because we're dealing with so many people in the retail environment, and everyone knows you have to put up new training material. You have to have conference calls with the regionals, the districts, and so on. You have to meet with all the operational teams in your distribution centers. And so not only were we didn't have a speed bump for the execution, we were actually able to implement even more robust communication back to the user in case, let's say, something happens. They actually get a label and it tells them exactly what to do if there's an issue. So that was a very exciting part for me to be able to be a part of the project and see that come to fruition with everyone. So, Josh.
And Scott, as much as I'd like to say that every single one of our customers experiences exactly that way, I will say that it is because of the team put together, is because of the fact that Finish Line was very serious about the project management associated with that, bringing in people like Josh, such that there was very clear communication across all the parties, Finish Line, Manhattan, ProShip, and any other systems that needed to be involved. That's really the key to making any implementation like this very successful.
Yeah, I can certainly hitchhike on that, Justin, for sure, because in our day-to-day lives, my primary role here is to optimize the supply chain software with the WCS, and just in my day-to-day role, right? And then look for some optimizations outside with applications like this, and then try to implement it. But when I say just implement it, it usually turns into a larger role in our day-to-day life. And we knew going in that if we didn't, when every single one of your customers, or a very large portion of your customers, are going to be managed through this label with a vendor, you have to take it seriously. And could not be happier with Josh and the Summit Group. Josh brings a wealth of experience as well. So some of the things that I thought I might have known, he brought to the table, which was really helpful, because even though I like to think I'm pretty good at operations still, he brought that to the table, and he also was able to think about fulfillment solutions for other things. But can't say enough that the investment into having a really good partner like Summit Advisory step in, Justin, was just it was a guiding. It was a guide that we needed to keep everybody on point. Even though we had our day-to-days, we knew that Josh was there, making sure that we were going to stay on track and deliver, which we did. And Josh will talk about that a little bit later. But no, totally agree.
Yeah, and Paul, I know, going back to this no process changes, this was a big deal, particularly during design with the Manhattan team. And we placed a lot of the onus on your team, but I'm sure this is something you're seeing more frequently from customers, is to be able to plug and play with, solutions such as ProShip, but have minimal impact to, the existing process. I don't know if you just want to touch on, how your team's able to achieve those types of goals.
Sure. No, you guys are exactly right. We know, if you go around and you change the process, it better be for the better. And definitely in this case, we wanted to limit the change in process to the end user as much as possible. Now, I know the goal was no process change, but in a project as large as this, there definitely was some process change. But how we tackled this is, in our detailed design sessions with Finish Line and ProShip, that was the focus on limiting the process change. But then we also focused on, hey, we're in here, what can we do to make the process better? So, for example, we put in detailed error logging to let a user know exactly what the issue was if a shipping label doesn't print. This allows Finish Line to quickly determine what the problem is and what needs to be addressed, to correct the problem. So, that was just some of the, stuff we did. But so, yeah, back to you, Josh.
Yeah, and I think that's a great call out. We did try to build in some improvements where we could, and I think that this concept of knowing when something's wrong and being able to to print a message that informs the user. I think that was something that obviously was hugely beneficial to the Finish Line team.
Right, and I just add a little bit there because like Scott was saying, before they were waiting for a label to print out before they put in ProShip, and if a label didn't print out, then somebody had to run around, figure out what was wrong with the label, why didn't it come out, definitely minutes wasted, trying to find that, whereas now they know exactly what's going on.
Right, absolutely. And I see a few questions over here on some of the stacks. So I'm going to take over for a bit and just continue the conversation about implementation, talk a little bit about our go live, and then how benefits realization and lessons learned. So for Finish Line, I can't speak to the specifics of their stack. However, I can say that Manhattan was a key partnership. And so like we talked about early on, we sat down firstly with Manhattan to have dialogue around what the program goals were and who some of the potential key vendors such as ProShip would be to achieve some of those goals. And for all the reasons we've already discussed, ProShip emerged as the leader for what Finish Line had needed. From a technology perspective though, we've talked a lot about Manhattan. We know that Finish Line has the one warehouse that Scott mentioned, and so that was a key integration for us. We did also have to integrate with a third-party point of sale application, and so there was this whole other aspect of making sure that whatever design and solution we did for the warehouse would kind of parlay into supporting the store fulfillment network. And so that was a lot of the upfront design and decision making that we had to make. The other thing I think that I wanted to call it for the audience is that it was also important that whoever was selected, so obviously ProShip was selected as a key partner, that their applications be supported with the major cloud platforms, cloud computing platforms. And Justin, I don't know if you just want to touch on how you've implemented, the ProShip suite of applications with some of the commonly used, cloud platform technologies.
Yeah, so to be clear, ProShip is always your servers are for you. So Finish Line servers are not next to anybody else's servers that ProShip might have as a customer. And for the purpose of speed, especially given the volume that Finish Line would have, or any other very large retailer, or high volume manufacturer or 3PL might have, we try to put our servers wherever the rest of the enterprise software stack is. So we want to be next to Manhattan. So if that means that you've gone into the Oracle Cloud, well, ProShip product can be installed in that same Oracle Cloud. Whether you have a physical data center, which were all very common 10 years ago, or whether your entire data center has moved into Azure, Amazon, IBM, whoever it might be, we don't have anything special that prevents us from going into any of those locations. Our product is very much dependent internally to make it a lot easier for somebody to say, well, you know what, we want to put one server in a physical data center and another server in Google's cloud. And we can say, yes, that can happen, but our design philosophy really has to do with keeping that speed as fast as possible. So if we can be closest to the rest of the enterprise software stack that we're interacting with, that's always what we recommend. And of course, that's what ended up happening here. We're in the same virtual data center, which allowed everything to go very, very fast. And we didn't have any of those extra milliseconds just dragging down here or there.
Yeah, and that's a great segue. So the other big aspect was just not only the complex network. So we mentioned over 500 different ship from and fulfillment locations, but the sheer volume. And so what I'll talk about next is, this project was occurring and planned for deployment and go live right before holiday 2019. And so obviously top of mind for all of us was making sure that the anticipated, daily, hourly, you name the frequency, volume could be supported as well. And so latency was definitely a topic of conversation. and then just, sheer capacity from an infrastructure standpoint. And that gets me into more of the development cycle. So I think collectively, and given some of the goals that Finish Line had, particularly around some of the business rules that we touched on earlier, we decided to develop using the Agile methodology. And so breaking down, each feature into its own set of development, test cases was critical for us, because as I mentioned, there was really no room for error. And given some of the logic that we wanted to use, we couldn't really wait till the end, where you may have layers of complexity that you had to dig into. And I'm gonna pause there, since it looks like we have a question about some of the process. So what was the decision-making process in selecting a parcel partner, key criteria for the company, and what did go live look like? Scott, I'll let you start on this one. I think, we've touched on some of the reasons that I think Finish Line decided to go with ProShip, but not sure if there's anything else you wanted to mention before I start to get into the go live process.
No, I think, just to address the question at this point, since it just came in, right? So we partnered with Manhattan first, and we basically asked them, can you help us? What do you think? What direction should we go? What are others doing that's helpful? And then from there, we went into the traditional RFP process, and there were several criteria that we looked at. Can they work with Manhattan? Can they work with our fulfillment solution in the stores? And so the decision for that was not just through the RFP process when it comes to, you're in the room and you're going through your checklist. There was also, as I remember it, Justin was actually personally in our RFP. And so you look for those people that you just know are going to be successful. And for us, we knew that the rules engines were there. And then at the end for selection, we knew that everybody that we needed to have the heart to make it happen was there too. So that was just something to add for there. And the key criteria, certainly, I think very foundationally, right? They had to have a robust routing engine. They had to have the ability to do very easy implementation with our current infrastructure. And for us, it's Manhattan. And then, Josh, I think I'll let you go from there, and you can kind of discuss the go live for both if you want to.
Yeah, I was going to say, so next up, sequence-wise, was talking about some of the go live process. So for Finish Line, in September of 2019, the first site to go live was the warehouse. And so there were changes, technical changes required on the Manhattan side, as well as just integration and kind of connecting the pipes, so to speak, with ProShip that were required. So that ended up being almost a full day process. We may have been able to do it sooner, but obviously when you're impacting every single package that is shipped out of your warehouse, you're handling it with kid gloves. And as we mentioned, a lot of that change was transparent to the end user. So most of us were locked in a room, and a lot of it was technical and validation that we were really trying to focus on. From there, the first store went live in October, and over the sequence of the month of October, we went from 1 store to 550 stores live working with ProShip. And so again, the only reason that we were really able to do it that quickly and before holiday was this concept of, there really wasn't a material process change for the in-store team. It's one thing to have to retrain associates at a single location or even a handful, but when you're talking about close to 600 different operational teams, you can't do that before the holiday season and expect to be successful. And then from there, it was really about holiday support. So we were going from October straight into the holiday season, peak season volumes. Looking back, some of the days we were looking at shipments in the 6 figures And so some pretty sizable days. Scott, I don't recall any performance issues that I can speak of due to volume. And I think, the combination of that and also the fact that Finish Line was able to leverage some of the new logic to achieve the goals was really a huge success for your team in 2019.
Yeah, we had zero impact from any volume at all. Now, again, like we've all kind of mentioned it already, the team took this component, the sizing, right? We took everything really seriously, knowing that the model even pre-COVID for the direct to consumer model was kind of, you had a forecast, but maybe it was going to be a little higher than you thought. But we took that seriously, so we had no impact at all for what ProShip expected to process for us, and right when we needed it, right? So we didn't want to have any issues during holiday peak, and didn't have to make any phone calls during those times. So that's solid.
Absolutely. And I think it's safe to say, from a benefits realization standpoint, I can't speak to the specifics, but Finish Line continues to benefit from this project every day, which is something that we're all very proud of. So final advice for me, we had a couple of lessons learned. We've talked a lot about the project team. I think for those of you, there's a lot of value as you embark in a program like this, making sure that you've got the right team, and even for your internal teams, making sure you've got focused resources. As I mentioned earlier, the fact that you're likely touching every shipment to your customer should not be taken lightly, right? And there's kind of zero room for error when it comes to that. We talked about the agile approach. I think really making sure you break this up when it comes to both development, testing, and deployment is something that requires a lot of focus and energy. And then for us, an improvement, we kind of look back and said, what are some things we could improve on next time? And I think for us, having the robust test cases is always something that we're looking to improve upon, especially as we go into more of that end-to-end or user acceptance testing. But for me, and before I guess we wrap up, I think stepping back to some of the goals we mentioned earlier, I think the key message that I have for the group is, yes, make sure you're focused on your operating expenses, but also be sure that as you are spending time and resources and energy, that you're also worrying about and improving your customer experience. And Scott, I don't know if you have anything else for the group.
So, to bring it for me, right, it's the epic finish, right, where we kicked off the presentation, right? That's the package being delivered, directly to the customer's door, and being able to look back at this project. It definitely wasn't because the company said, here's 3 more months than you need to do the project, right? We can never afford to do those things. But I think there were the ability to be honest, with the vendors, and the vendors to know where you're coming from. And that was part of it, right? Being as transparent with everybody, and for everybody to know that we were going to put forth the effort and the time, and that really, it goes a long way. And all of us have done the projects, where you're shorthanded or you don't have enough time. And on this one, we felt the pressure to achieve within more than, we knew we had dates and timelines to hit, but a solid plan going in, solid partnerships. Paul and his team stepped up with anybody that has Manhattan knows when they do changes, many SDNs to make it happen. The ProShip team, folks are calling each other by first names, and getting to know each other. And it was just exciting to be in the room there when we were go live, because not only did we achieve the goal before, the final day, if you will, it was just from the beginning to the end, the partnership was great. And that's why we wanted to actually share the story today. So.
Great. Paul or Justin, any final advice for the audience?
Yeah, I'll step in here, and I do want to, there's a question from the audience that, Josh, I wanted to throw towards you, but before I throw that question at you, I want to again, I want to reiterate that one of the reasons this went so well, and we have a lot of great deployments, but one of the reasons this went so well is because Finish Line took the project so serious. And as Scott was saying, every resource necessary was available. And the fact that they went a step above and pulled in some advisory team with Josh, we could definitely see a lack of friction that we would normally, just as part of what we do, try to overcome within an organization. So Josh, I think that we need to throw it to you for a second here to get you to tell us a bit about how your team's philosophy is to help reduce that friction that it sounds like Scott noticed, and well, I can tell you from the ProShip side, we definitely noticed.
Sure, and as I had introduced earlier, you know, this is a common role for and fit for Summit advisory teams. So we tend to take on more of that program leadership, or specifically that program manager role, and very simplistically, that's, you know, we're the glue. So whether that be a project that's completely internal to a client or retailer, in this case, and typically it tends to involve third parties and other vendors such as Manhattan and ProShip. But you know, we're the glue that not only makes sure that the typical, you know, project management activities are going the way that you know, the client hopes, but also that the vendors are getting what they need. And in a project like this, as Justin mentioned, it can be fairly substantial in terms of the amount of focus and just the amount of preparation that the client will, you know, they require from clients. And so that's where, you know, with Summit, that's the role that we like to play, and we make sure that for all parties, things are moving and people are getting the, you know, the information and answers that they need. Because again, stepping back to the goals, if you can be more consistent to your customers and reduce your costs, you know, the return on investment is there, right? The ability to deliver the value sooner than later pays for itself. And that's where we like to play, Justin. We like to help clients get to that speed to benefit as soon as possible.
Excellent. Scott, I'm not sure now, Scott. Paul, let's make sure we bring you back in here for a final comment as well.
Sure. Thanks, Justin. You know, from what I saw, I mean, this was a great a project, very smooth. But you know, everybody's already said it, but you know, I'll say it again. A lot of times when I see customers tackle big projects like this, they give it over to someone, and he's already got 20 things on his plate and can't put the proper time to manage this thing. So, you know, Josh definitely bridged that gap there. And then we just went about, you know, executing and doing, you know, proper project planning and execution, you know, great design sessions, shared our test cases back and forth with Finish Line, made sure we did robust testing our side, Finish Line did robust testing on their side, and then had a good solid plan for go live. You know, I really thank my team here at Manhattan, because they spent a lot of late nights, you know, supporting. There was a few minor hiccups, but you know, we were there 24/7 over you know, the weekend to make sure everything worked great. I had a functional and technical team there. So yeah, I guess that's you know, my thoughts on why I thought it went so great.
Excellent, excellent. Scott, I got one last one here from the CFO types. It sounds, you know, the CFOs love the fact that it sounds like everything went well. There was no operational problems, anything like that. But though you can't get down into details, let's talk about the ROI. Did Finish Line achieve an ROI with this, or is there anything you can talk about around that?
So I'm limited with what my response can be here.
Mhm.
I can say this, I certainly wouldn't be doing this presentation less than 8 months from implementation if the things that we wanted to achieve were not achieved in a very soon, a lot sooner than we had even thought. So
Excellent, excellent. All right, so that is, Scott, thank you for that. I know that's a little bit more of a difficult question because none of us like to tip our ROI cards, but so thank you for at least telling us what you can. For everybody else, please, if you notice on the screen right now, there's ways to contact each of us if you're interested in that. As well, remember there are 2 handouts that you can still download at this point in time. And then finally, if you have to leave, if you missed part of this because a phone call came in, you will be getting an email with a link to watch the full program later. So if anybody else has any other questions, please continue to add them. We will answer them via email after this. And with that, I'd like to thank Scott Davis, Paul Wade, and Josh Meyer for attending this webinar. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.